Give me a couple of minutes of your time. I'm going to cook for a minute and you're going to tell me if I'm crazy or not. So over the years, Call of Duty Zombies has had a story that I've been absolutely enamored with. I've been fascinated by it. I've been enraptured by it. And the nature of the story has changed a lot from when it started way back in Call of Duty World at War. Nowadays, we obviously have a new branch of the story. We've got the Dark Ether story following the Ether story from the past. We're all on the same page here, so I don't need to over-explain this, I don't think. But with that has come some degree of reticence from the community to engage with that new material and almost a lack of willingness to enjoy it as much as the days gone by. And I think that it's absolutely categorically wrong to blame the community for not enjoying the new material. I think that is insanity, but nor do I think it's entirely a case of assuming that if Treyarch came out with a cool story right here today, we would all latch onto it in the same way that we did in 2009. Like, the stakes have changed, and that's okay, but I today want to explore how Treyarch can deliver a story to us, how they can write a story for us, which in the scope of the world that we live in right now, as opposed to one from 10 years ago, can actually exist functionally and can still check the boxes that warm all of our dark, twisted hearts. Because boy, we're a messed up community, we are. We've got so much baggage from 10 years of zombies craziness, and we are dragging it with us, ball and chain, wherever we go. And that's a difficult thing for Treyarch to live up to. So let's talk about how they can live up to it and why we care about this stuff in the way that we do in the first place. Like I said, I'm about to cook and I'm not sure what I'm cooking. You're gonna have to be the one that tells me if the result of this recipe is awful and nonsense, and we know that we do not like nonsense on this channel, so be honest with me, okay? Something I've detected I have loved over the years is finding stories in media in which characters and peoples and groups of people have a great lacking within themselves that they need to fulfill in some way, often by going on a journey of some kind. This can be literal or this can be figurative. And I'm not talking about your traditional hero's journey here. The hero's journey would be the protagonist, in most cases, having something happen that makes them go on a quest, right? That's the overall start of the structure. They begin that quest with one premise in mind, one reason for going on the quest. Things happen to them and they experience growth of some description on the quest. And then they realize that the quest actually was giving them something else entirely, and they return triumphant with that new knowledge being the new thing that is more important to them, rather than the fickle attitude or the feeble-minded kind of viewpoint that they started off with that was actually unimportant from the offset. That's your hero's journey. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about more so when it's almost an antagonist that has to go through that process. When there's an antagonist and their motivation is chasing this journey that they need to go on, again, literal or figurative, in order to satisfy this great wound that they have inside themselves, this emptiness, this hole, and that journey is the only way that they can fill that. So an example of this might be the Covenant from Halo, okay? The Covenant literally, I mean, they couldn't have been more obvious about this if they tried, want to go on a great journey. They have this religious compulsion to go on this great journey. It is seeded through their society. That is so important to those little weird know-me alien peoples. And you'll also see this throughout media. I'm going to give a generalized example here, and you can probably think of a bunch of ways that this sort of thing comes up, where it's someone who feels lost, meaningless, they feel like society doesn't care about them, and so they act out to make themselves known, to prove a point, to draw attention, things like that. Like, I'm almost thinking of, is it the Riddler in the latest Batman? Is that kind of vibe? Another example, weirdly, I don't know why I'm drawing from Batman here, but like Bane in Batman, where he's like, we are making a movement happen because we are underrepresented, and we want to strike fear into these people's hearts that control this system as it currently stands. But it's kind of the underdog almost that deserves the spoils of war or the riches or what have you. Like, those stories are everywhere. Society isn't fair. Underdog comes up, tries to take control, tries to overthrow a balance that isn't fair. Hero steps in to maintain order, so at face value being lawful good, but actually maintains a system which may have some intrinsic flaws in it, may have some societal flaws that are being perpetuated. And so there's sort of the question of, okay, you're being good, but to what end? And who decides who does get to win in the first place and who doesn't? And those are some of the more fun stories that you'll see, whether it's in the superhero realm, like I referenced Batman, or whether it's in the video game realm or whatever. So we see this a lot, and I really am attracted to stories of this, where this antagonist group has some kind of cultish, religious, fanatical, whatever obsession with achieving this goal to fill this wound in themselves, okay? Sort of, in a way, another vibe of this that I've really liked over the years was the Flesh in Black Ops 2. So you remember when Transit came out and we started hearing about these groups of people that had heard the voices from the radio towers instructing them to do various things. And one of the things that they ended up kind of being persuaded into, I recall at least, is eating the flesh of other people. And they started doing that and started hearing voices and started more and more being in tune with this overall message that they had to follow, this dictum, I think that's the word, that they had to follow. Googling it. A formal pronouncement from an authoritative source. Damn, I'm good. Dictum. So being more and more tuned in with that, I'm really actually impressed with myself there. Being more and more tuned in with it, and therefore getting even more confident in their need to continue to eat more flesh and to listen to the voices and to eat more flesh and to become one with the flesh, to establish a sort of a collective consciousness with the rest of the flesh as well. And this also being tied to this carnal hunger and the symbolism and semiotics that come along with just consumption in general. The need for consumption being based on the fact that you have something missing inside you and you're refueling, or you're filling that gap, and you're sustaining yourself and you're making yourself whole in doing so. It's literally becoming you. Like all these sorts of vibes, right? And I know, still cooking here, but I know I'm being quite abstract, but I want you to think about ways that this applies to different games that you've played, different media that you've consumed, books, TV shows, films, etc. All of them will apply here. Just situations where there is this underlying fundamental need for the antagonist to get its way. Let's anchor this on zombies. Why do the Apothicons do what they do? Are they seeking to eternally kind of consume everything? Is that kind of the vibe that we got from the Apothicons? I'd say yes. I'd say that the Apothicons as a species are not one that are completely coherent in human terms. I think that there was a lot more ambiguity with regards to some of their motivations and aspirations. But certainly, translating Astoth Arogaroth, Ozoth Arogwaoth into All Fall Apothicon Rise kind of gives you the vibe that they're looking to conquer everything, first of all. They're a very domineering and omnipotence-seeking kind of society, if you will. But also, they were talking about consumption the whole time. So I think it's fair to say that they also, in many ways, were kind of driven by this need. And the quest for 115, the goal of accruing 115 from all these different factions, whether it's in Zetsabo, whether it's in Gorod Krovi, whether it's in Der Eisendrache, this endless obsession with 115 and trying to stack more of it and use it to gain more power, etc., is a perpetual and endless Sisyphean task. And it's always based on this underlying thought of needing to fill this void, right? Like, if we refer to Camus for a second, which is a little rogue, but bear with me here, one of my favorite quotes in any book I've ever read is the phrase, beginning to think is beginning to be undermined, first of all. Society has but little connection with such beginnings. The worm is in man's heart. That is where it must be sought. One must follow and understand this fatal game that leads from lucidity in the face of experience to flight from light. Camus is sort of indirectly arguing here that it's in beginning to think that this great burden, this great wound is placed on all of us, and it's an underlying feature that drives these people, that drives these races, whether it's alien races or what have you, to these awful, crippling, demented, terrible ends of trying to conquer the universe or consume everything or whatever it might be, eat other humans, etc. But something I want to examine today, while we're doing our little dancey dance, trying to figure out, like, why are zombies fun? Let me cook, is I want to examine why I love those stories in the way that I do. Like, what is it about that fanaticism that I find so fun and also so kind of appealing, I guess. And I wonder, let me cook here, if there's a chance that when I describe like the Covenant as having this wound that they are trying to fulfill or trying to paper over by going on their great journey, I wonder if maybe in assigning this wound to them from my perspective, I'm actually exposing my own societal wound, not theirs. You see, in society, I think many of us not only feel like society doesn't care about us and all those sorts of things. I mean, that's a global issue that's on the rise, and I think affects all of us in our own ways, some more than others, obviously. But in general, like, having purpose is something that all of us struggle with in one way or another. And yet, I'm looking at an alien race like the Covenant, and I'm going, they have such clear purpose. It is abundantly clear. And the purpose is not actually, in this case, to amass riches in a very sort of capitalist lens. It's actually just to go somewhere. Like, nothing could be more simple in some senses. And yet I'm looking at it as like, oh, they must be haunted by this fanatical desire that's like a mental complex that they can't escape, and that must be what's pushing them. What if actually they just want to go somewhere and they feel like they have purpose? And in categorizing it as this great wound that they have, I'm actually showing that maybe I, in my enjoyment of stories that tap into this sort of thing, am feeling my own lack of purpose a little bit and sort of going, well, if they're doing this massive thing, maybe I should be too. And why aren't I right now? Like, they are already whole. They are fine. They are good. I'm saying, like, they aren't whole in this way, but they are. And I'm sort of like colonizing their belief system and the way that they live and the way that they operate and the existence and the presence that they have in the world, and projecting my own views and values onto them. It's an interesting question, right? Like, why should they need to live the way that I need to live? Just because in society, like all of us, every single one of us watching this video, I'm sure, like, we're sort of stuck in the rat race, right? Like, we wake up, we go to work, you do our work, it exhausts you, tires you out. What are you doing it for? To stack your little gold coins. Why are you stacking the gold coins? Because you need them just to survive. What if there was a simpler world out there where little Covenant buddy over here could just go on his great journey, and that's actually the box checked. He's got his purpose, he's happy, he's figured it out. For me to be like, well, he's not amassing wealth, so therefore it's wrong, seems a bit extreme, right? Maybe he's already rich because he's figured it out that it doesn't matter about that stuff. He just wants to go on his little walk. I mean, figuratively speaking. He wants to go on his great journey. And is there not richness and wholeness within that? I think that a lot of this applies to prophecy in storytelling as well. Like, how dreamy would it be to have a place in the world as a person? Like, ask yourself right now, if you relate to this, how amazing would it be? How fulfilling, how wonderful, how warming would it be to your bones to have a place in the world dictated by an ancient text that articulates your very specific neededness on this planet? To never again have to question, why am I here? What am I here to do? Where am I going? Why am I doing that? Does it all matter? Should I even bother? All those questions would be gone, because this old book would be like, yeah, Milo, yeah, that MrRoflWaffles guy, he's on this planet to do this, and the this could be to make a sandwich. It could be something so inane, so pointless, and yet I would know in that moment that I had place on this world just for that. And it didn't matter. I didn't have to worry about aspiring to great career heights, because actually I was just here to live and make a sandwich, man. And how wonderful that would be, I think. It would be freeing, I think, in many ways, because so many of us feel like we're on this grind constantly. We're constantly trying to feed this machine of whether it's work, or for me, like whether it's YouTube or whatever it might be. But instead, to be prophesized and to be written into the tapestry of history in that way is to be demarcated as essential in the historic record of time itself, instead of real life reality where there is infinite room for you to doubt how needed you are, because the machine just keeps on eating. No matter how much you shovel into it, it keeps freaking eating. So is there a chance that it's stories in that area that make me kind of subconsciously have these dialogues with myself that I don't often tap into in a conscious manner by any means? But is there a chance that I'm recognizing that underlying thread there and going, ooh, that's kind of like tickling the backs of my knees? Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm walking through the tall grass and it's it's brushing against my shins, and I'm like, oh, there's sensation there. Don't know what it is. Not gonna look down, but there's something. And I think that we had that feeling, I think, in Zombies in a big way over the years. But as we've gotten further into the story, and especially in the Dark Ether story, it's felt a little bit like we've lost our way with that. Like, a story which is very human and is about whether or not a certain company or a certain person has access to nuclear codes starts to take away those sorts of questions about place in society and a wound, whether it's theirs or mine, that I'm trying to fill or they're trying to fill by going on this either hero's quest in my case or antagonist's quest in theirs. Like, where have those been recently? And I think that the redemption in our eyes, in many of our eyes, of Peck in Cold War could be an example of that sort of thing starting to seep in. Like him talking about his history a little bit and doing his little dance and all that stuff. Like, awesome. That started to give me some food in that area to nibble on. But when other aspects of the story are so flat and so boringly focused on the military and boringly focused on like modern warfare campaign minutia, which is essentially just like words frothing out of a monkey with a typewriter that happen to be slanted towards the military and jingoism and patriotism and nationalism. When we go in that sort of direction, kind of start tuning out. I think it's my biggest fear actually about this year's Call of Duty is not that the zombies isn't going to be fun. It's going to be that there's going to be absolutely no reason to give a damn about the overall narrative of it anymore, because it's just going to lean in to, hey, Laswell's got a mission for you to shoot 3 things, and that will mean that some unnamed, unknown, made-up faction in a made-up country is going to end up selling some weapons to another faction in another made-up country like Uzbekistan, and then they're going to end up getting their hands on nuclear launch codes, which they'll sell to the Russians or the Chinese, depending on what's in vogue to be hating on in a given year. Maybe the North Koreans will end up coming into it at some point, and the sort of cycle will repeat. Like, I just find that very... It's no longer got room, almost, to have that Black Ops charm of subverting that system. Like, part of the reason I think that Black Ops was so great is because it said, yeah, here's your military-industrial complex, here's all the above-board stuff, but here's the tiny fraction of that world giving LSD to soldiers to see what would happen. Like, we're going to actually dive into that section of things. Or, yeah, there was a president that was assassinated. We're going to just kind of see if maybe some, like, mind control was involved. Like, yeah, that would be fun, right? It doesn't feel like the Modern Warfare story of, like, okay, double-crossed by another Russian. Woo! Oh, no, they've got nukes again. Woo! It doesn't feel to me like that's tapping Black Ops energy in any capacity, and that's fundamental to the zombie story in a big way. And it doesn't feel to me like the sci-fi stuff of the zombie story, which was not even Black Ops, it was its own thing, and the exploration of humanity in that sense has really been leveraged in the way that I would like. Like, in Cold War, I feel like they really could have made us feel a lot of sympathy for mimics. I think that there was cannon fodder there that they could have dived into in more detail or in more depth. We had a little bit, there was a few radios, there's some ciphers, bits and pieces like that, text messages, whatever. With this woman, I think she basically ends up in the Dark Ether, and then slowly she changes over time. She ends up with scaly skin. She's like, oh no, this is dreadful. And then it ends up being the rest of her message just being like grunts because she's turned into a mimic, right? And like that sort of thing is such ripe opportunity to teach me something about myself. You know what I mean? It's ripe opportunity to expose humanity in a way, but the way it was delivered, uninteresting. None of us cared. And that's not to say that none of us cared about the Cold War story, but I don't think any of us, and I'm saying that as in the vast majority, the 99% who are really important to get on board with this sort of thing, because we were on board in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3, etc. But we don't look back on that one mimic story that you may not even be aware of because people were so collectively uninterested that they never actually talked about it. But we simply saw that material or didn't and went, okay, yeah, she's a mimic now, I guess. Like, it didn't hit. It didn't sink its teeth in. And I wish, I long for the day where I was being bitten at by the story with every update that came out, and was constantly like, does this have a deeper meaning? Does this mean that this historic event didn't happen and it was actually caused by zombies? Does this mean that this motivation here? Like, what's the deal with the eye colors, right? And what's the deal with just 115 in general? What's the deal with the MPD? And what's the deal with all these other sci-fi elements? The Vril Yar, right? Like, where do they fit in amongst all of this? What's the deal with Venus? Right? The entire mining operation on Venus or whatever the hell's going on there. Like these sorts of mysteries and fundamental questions I've wondered about for so long. And I feel like the old story, and maybe I'm just being biased here because I really like the old story, but I feel like the old story played with some themes and ideas here in a way that really intrigued me. And a lot of the voice acting also was so goddamn good back in the day that it roped you into this stuff. And nowadays it feels a little bit vanilla. And I'm worried about that for this year. Did I cook? Have I just been making no sense for the last 20 minutes? I really don't know. I'm trying to self-examine here. I'm trying to self-interrogate, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of why I give a damn about one thing and don't about another. And it's not for lack of trying, because I would love to love the new story. I would love to, but to some extent, it takes two to tango, you know what I mean? And there's been certain things in Cold War that I thought were really good. Don't get me wrong. It's just that we all can appreciate and discuss openly the fact that it was a simplified year of zombies for the story. Like, they did not actually try and twist and turn us in the same way that they might have done in Black Ops 3, for instance, because that was not the purpose of it. It was laying foundational layer, it was laying groundwork, etc. They had to establish a base of operations, a base of characters from which to pull from and start to layer more complex narratives for the future. So I'm not criticizing it for that. We all understand its purpose and why it was the way it was, I think. But what that means is that that work has been done now in a big way. This game, Modern Warfare 3, is the opportunity for them to say, we've got more in the tank here. And I'm already noticing, for example, with Weaver being dead and presumably the others, Carver and Shaw and stuff, being dead around the table in that cutscene that we saw, that reveal trailer. Maybe we're going to be getting loads of that stuff and I'm not going to have to worry too much. But then I see like Laswell in a cutscene and I'm like, oh. Well, it's Laswell. Okay. Personally, don't really care. And I'm not sure I will ever care about Laswell in the context of zombies. So it's a tricky push-pull when they're bringing our beloved IP into a very sanitary universe that is a very different thing, that's much more grounded and therefore not doing all this weird, wacky, experimental stuff that's what I really love. I would really love if we could have a bit of introspective discussion in the comments section, because I've been thinking about this so much recently, and I can't quite get to the bottom of it. I'm excited for this year, but I want that excitement to be based on stuff that they do, not on my hopes that things can meet the expectations that I dream up and the ways that I think things should be. Screw that. We're getting what is, what's real, and I'm just hoping that what's real can be pleasantly surprising. That is what I'm crossing my fingers for and trying to manifest into existence.